Alright everybody, here I am back with the first update to my budget Powerwall project. The thing I'm going to tackle first is this DIY BMS project, well, sub-project or whatever you want to call it, because that's what really interests me and I don't have any other parts yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and get it done. There I go, kicking the tripod. So currently I just have one of these active balance boards on here, and this one's a 16S version for my friend's 48 volt battery bank I'm going to be building later. He's doing a small house array, and we'll use those to balance his. But I just had that on the battery bank. I'll go ahead and rip that off. I'm going to put together using these connectors and some pre-crimped JST wires, and then solder on, well, crimp on and heat shrink the ring lugs to connect to each battery. The only downside with these things that kind of get to focus, that kind of irritates me, is the you have to run a power and ground to each and every battery, which I guess kind of makes sense. But whereas with these not BMSs, but balancing boards, you just run one to the main negative, and then they have it wired so that, you know, since it's all on the same circuit board, the plus of one cell is the minus of the next cell. So that's pretty nice, but it's a pretty small thing to overcome, given you get a really cool web interface on this guy, and it hooks up into like MQQT and whatever the other popular one is. And so I'll show you guys that later when I hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, have it up and running. So it looks like these pre-crimped JST wires I got off eBay are 28 gauge, which should work alright with these red connectors. You just strip off, you know, more of this than I did here, and fold it back over on itself once. Usually makes it thick enough to be crimped on with the red ring lug connectors. And then the heat shrink, well, it's got glue in it, so it'll hold it down just fine anyways. It's not like this thing's going anywhere. Alright, and here we have one stripped and then one folded over itself, just so you can see how it's done. The lengths, you know. Alright, here we go. Crimp one on for you guys. Of course, I pick up the only connector in the whole bin that's stuck to another one. So you got the wire folded over. Use your, you know, extra low quality crimpers. Just give that a nice double-handed yam. So a unit of force, and give it a little tug. Good to go. It's ready to sit and wait till it dies a horrible death of being heat shrunk. Of course, now that I've already done 2 of these, better than having done all 8, but it's probably a good time to check that they actually are wired correctly and turn on the BMS cells. Alright, looks like we got we got red wire going in the plus symbol. It's always good. There we go. Blinking lights. Das blinken lighten. Always a good sign. Give it one more blink before we rudely unplug it. There we go. Cool. So I'll get back to making the rest of those cables and heat shrink them all at the end. Alright, here we go. Got all 8 of these bad boys crimped. Now it's time to go blast them with the heat gun. Show you how they turn out. Alright, and here, once the camera focuses, are all of the heat shrunk ones. I had one of these where the wires stuck through a little bit, and I had to solder it just to be safe. And then yeah, a word to the wise when you're building these is, so you can see how this edge over here is kind of opaque. You can't really see the black wire. Versus up here, or, you know, kind of deeper into the crimp, you can see the black shadow of the wire. That's how you know that the glue is, you know, contacting that part of the wire, especially when you're doing these really small wires. Normally when you've done more correctly sized wire, this isn't going to focus, you'll see the glue sticking, it kind of oozing out of the tail end, but this wire is just too small for that, so you kind of got to just look for that shadow and make sure it's making contact in there. Yeah, there we go, all 8 of them. And now the real reason I bought this wire was to make all the communication cables, because just like the Batriums or Batriums, however you say it, with the boards, you have a TX and RX port, and so you daisy chain them all, and then, you know, the first TX or RX comes out of the master and into all these, and then the last goes back into the RX of the master. So that's why I got these double-ended JST wires and connectors. So I'm just gonna throw a bunch of those together and make the communication wires. And a word to the not wise, if anyone's ever copying this someday, is these little cables going from diyBMS to diyBMS that are completely out of focus and finally got in focus are not straight pass-throughs. You can see the rib on the top of each connector, and then if they were straight pass-throughs, the colors would be swapped on each side, but they're matched as you hold them next to each other. So this is correct. I built this wrong incorrectly, but didn't show it. And this is the correct way to build these communication cables. There we go. It's a nice bundle of these finished up. I think that should be enough to connect all the boards. I'd already made a couple beforehand. So now I'm on to wiring up all the boards and seeing if it works. This isn't my final pack, right? This is just a 1x. Eventually I'll go to a 2x and maybe even a 3x down the road. But I'm just going to build them all, you know, and hang them loosely off the side of here to start and make sure everything's working correctly. Alright, what did we learn? Well, probably should have frickin' unplugged this before I started taking it off. You can see I absolutely roasted part of it there. It was not smart on my spot. There went, you know, 20 bucks or so, and more importantly, 3 weeks of shipping. Well, good thing I have a spare, but I really wanted to use both of them on my friend's project. So, yeah, there you go, right there. Burnt it. Dope. Yeah, in addition to dig a little deeper into that, that was definitely because I was working my way down the pack together. So at the very end there, I had, you know, just say 2 wires on here and here, but there's what, 4 or 5 cells between there, so that ends up being a pretty significant 12 to 14 or 15 volts. That's definitely what did it. Grr. Well, let's get all these wired up, and I'll make sure I get all the pluses on the plus and the minus on the minus. Shouldn't matter too much plugging them all in because, well, they're all in separate circuit boards. I guess that is one advantage to separate circuit boards. Alrighty, so I'm going to hook these up one at a time and make sure that they show up instead of just going for all of them at once. And I'll try and grab some shots of the web interface as well. See how that looks. Alright, here we go. First 2 hooked up, wired into the controller, and I'm just running it off a battery bank right now. And I hopped on the Wi-Fi network, and there we go. They're both showing up correctly, and you know, if I hold my finger over one of the temperature sensors, see when the next update comes through here. Well, I got 1 degree bump on the left. Maybe there it goes, 24. My fingers are just really cold. Surprising nobody. Alright, well I think I'm going to double-sided tape these onto these batteries. And I know that's a little bit more permanent, but if I ever make this battery bank bigger, which I plan to, I'll just make sure these are the outermost batteries and it won't be an issue. Just so that I don't have these accidentally touch each other when I've got a couple of them strung up, you know. Even though this cell to this cell is only 6 volts max or 6.4, I still don't want to risk damaging these. Sounds good. Alrighty, there we go. There's the first 4 cells configured. So keep working and show you when I got all 8. And would you look at this? Here we go. All 8 on here. I put this last one on crooked. I think this foam is slightly conductive and it was pulling the reading down. You can see the lights run across them. These are the last 4 cells. There's the first 4 and the controller down there. And here we are. Got, you can see pretty consistent reading across all the cells. I haven't calibrated them yet besides the first one, so I think actually a lot of these should be a little lower. And then all the temperature sensors seem to be working. You know, I held my finger on this one and it heated up. I'll go through and check the rest of them in a bit. And here we are. It's a pretty nice interface. You got the overall voltage and your min-max range, and then these symbols on the graphs represent the max and min that have been measured over time. So that should be that. Maybe I'll do one more clip another day here showing after I calibrate them, but that should be it for the BMS install. Well, at least the BMS monitoring install. Thanks very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment if you have questions. I've got a link to this project. It's Stuart Pittaway's project. He's the maker of this diyBMS V4, and it's pretty neat for the money. I think I built mine for well under $100 in components, and then you buy a contactor for maybe $90 for a high quality like 500 amp one, and you're good to go. So definitely a neat alternative to something like a Batrium.